Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast, where we journey down the path of the modern homesteading movement by sharing the stories and ideas of homesteaders around the world. So whether you're just thinking about someday living the homesteading lifestyle or have been for many years, we want to help everyone homestead today for a better tomorrow.
Well, hello there. I'm your homesteading host, Harold Thornborough, and welcome back to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. Here's a question for you. Have you ever thought about growing mushrooms on your homestead? Maybe you're already doing it, but you're thinking about upping your game and growing them as a cash crop. Well, we have a pretty good show for you today. Then on today's podcast, I'm joined by Mike Hatfield. Mike, along with his wife and young daughter, work their homestead called Flyway Family Farm in southern Illinois, where they specialize in organically grown gourmet mushrooms, vegetables, fruits, and herbs. And with that, let's just jump into the conversation I had with Mike. Well, Mike, welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I wonder if you could take a couple minutes and just tell us how you first got into homesteading and maybe a little about your homestead and ultimately how you ended up being known as Mike the Mushroom Man Hatfield on Facebook.
Yeah. My wife and I have been on our farm about 6.5 years now, and we originally met while we were at Southern Illinois University here in Southern Illinois, and I was working on a degree in forestry, and I was in school. I was never happy living in town and doing the typical student thing, and so I was always renting little cabins out in the woods and having gardens, and got into growing chickens, and I think it was my first or second year down here, I had met some folks that were real into morel hunting and mushroom hunting, and that led to meeting another guy who was growing some shiitake mushrooms, and that's kind of how I got involved with doing the mushroom thing. Is just kind of a hobby gone wild. And after graduating, my wife and I bought a little 9.5 acre farm and moved out here, and we've since had a beautiful little girl, and kind of things have just kind of kept on rolling. We now have, really we do a little bit of everything out here.
Mm-hmm.
The mushroom production is our main thing that we do for commercial purposes that we sell at farmers markets and things, but we grow, a little bit less than an acre of organic veggies, and we have a little orchard and do lots of fruit and veggies, and have about probably about 1,000 shiitake logs in our woods.
Wow.
And we have goats and a horse that we're in the middle of training right now to start pulling a potato digger and doing our firewood hauling and all that, and a couple of little Dexter cows and chickens and ducks and geese, and
Into a little bit of everything there, huh?
yeah, hogs, bees, rabbits, just about everything. We try to be as self-sufficient as we can, and so we've gotten, we probably raise about 75 or 80% of our own food. We do all ourselves. We haven't really gotten much into doing grain quite yet. So we still buy that from the store, but
yeah, it takes a lot of room. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on schedule for this year, at least some
Really?
small experimental.
Well, I seen a post from you, I think yesterday on your Facebook page that you started tapping some maple trees or something. Am I right?
Yeah. This is the third year that we've tapped the trees, and our farm is kind of a mix. We got a little pond and some open area, and we have quite a bit of woods, and there's a lot of maple trees in it. And yeah, I think the first year we maybe tapped 5 or 6 trees just to kind of get a feel for it. And last year we tapped 13 or 14 trees and ended up making, I think about 6 gallons of syrup last year. I've only tapped about 15 trees right now. I have another 15 or 20 that I could do, but the way the sap's flowing right now, we've been pretty busy just with these 15 trees. We've already made a couple gallons, and so I might just kind of turn that into a bit of a rotation, do kind of half the trees one year and the other half of the trees next year. That way they get a little bit of extra rest.
Yeah, that's a pretty, when it comes down to cooking it down and stuff, that's pretty labor intensive. Making syrup's pretty labor intensive, isn't it?
It is. It's we really don't have a good way of collecting other than tapping the trees and letting them run into buckets and jugs in the woods, and then a couple a day I carry a couple of 5-gallon buckets through and make rounds and pick it up, and it gets tiring carrying 10 gallons of sap out of the woods a couple of times a day, and we usually have the pots cooking, as long as we're up. I turn it back on and in the morning as soon as I get up, and pretty much let them go until I'm ready to fall asleep at night. And it's kind of, as long as the weather is good, it's a nonstop.
Yeah,
it can be. I think we were cooking syrup almost nonstop for a month.
I was going to say it's a long process cooking it down to get it refined. A lot of people just stick with the sap itself, or just thin it down just a little bit and use that. I've heard of a few people doing that.
Yeah, well, we do. Yeah, this time of year we drink a lot of the sap just straight. It's incredible. It has a real subtle, sweet, mapley flavor to it, but it's just, I call it the life force drink. If you drink that stuff, and man, it invigorates you. It's delicious and it's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like, though, that mushrooms are your main thing, though. You got a little bit of everything going on, but so you say that mushrooms are the thing that you maybe make the most money on, or that you, for commercial purposes, that's what you grow?
Yeah, it really kind of just started out as a hobby, doing some shiitake logs, and then that progressed to trying all sorts of different things on logs, and then beds, and oyster mushrooms and the wine cap mushroom and lion's mane, things that we can grow both on logs and on wood chip beds and straw beds outdoors. And it was about 2.5 years ago we started selling some of them off of the logs, and put together a pretty cheap little makeshift indoor room to try to start growing oyster mushrooms indoors on straw, and started doing some small markets, but we've been upgraded that quite a bit since then, and that's mostly what we sell at farmers market now. We do shiitake, mostly shiitake and oyster mushrooms year-round indoors. I'm starting to get into doing a little bit more, some of the more specialty mushrooms like the king oyster and lion's mane mushrooms and namako and fiopino, a few other kind of specialty gourmet mushrooms. It's been great. It's kind of a void that we kind of stumbled upon in our area as far as a little market niche. Because it was hard trying to get into farmers markets just doing the produce.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's always has the same things for sale there. And, I've told people that before. If you really want to make money at the farmers market, bring something that not everybody else is bringing.
Yeah, and there was a time when we were looking at possibly expanding our goats and doing goat milk and cheeses and soap, but it was looking like several tens of thousands of dollars to get a commercial grade dairy and creamery going, and the mushrooms were always a bit of a passion, and they've really been a part of our life ever since my wife and I met. Our first dates were going out mushroom hunting, and so it was just kind of a bit of a logical choice.
Sure.
And just kind of a hobby that snowballed a bit out of control.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah. I first ran into you on Facebook when I'm thinking about growing some mushrooms myself, and I'm been around them a lot in the sense that I've foraged for them and stuff. But I've never grew any. And you were kind to come on and answer a few questions for me on a thread one day. And I think what you're doing is great, though. You got how many varieties are you growing right now?
Oh gosh, it really changes during the season. One of the things we try to do, especially with our indoor operation, is to switch up our strains and the varieties so that we're not, in the winter we don't heat our room. The mushrooms produce quite a bit of heat themselves. So we do cold weather things in the winter so that we don't have to heat the room. And then in the summer we do some of the more tropical varieties so that I still have to cool the room a little bit to keep things in balance. But that allows us to only cool it minimally but we grow oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, lion's mane, wine cap, namiko, pio pino, medicinal mushrooms like reishi and turkey tail. We grow maitake. Every now and then we grow things like enoki mushrooms. Trying to think what else.
Yeah, that's quite a few already.
Yeah, king oyster mushrooms. Yeah, just really a little bit of everything. We grow pretty much most of the edible mushrooms, except your typical button mushroom. The typical button mushrooms are
hard to compete with those.
Grown on compost, and pretty much everything we grow is all tree-loving mushrooms. So we're able to grow it on either sawdust or cellulosic farm waste like straw or cottonseed hulls or corn cobs. The oyster mushrooms are great on agricultural waste like that.
What kind of logs do you usually use? Is it oak or?
We do a big mix. Probably half of our logs are are oak logs for the shiitakes.
Yeah.
And then the other half are a mix of mostly maple and cherry and a little bit of hickory. And that's mostly because that's what we have in our woods. But I really like doing the mix. Some of the softer hardwoods, like the maple and the cherry, will colonize faster and produce bigger crops of mushrooms sooner when they're grown on the logs than the exact same mushrooms grown on a harder wood like oak. That just kind of helps spread our harvest out a little bit. You end up getting a little bit more mushrooms over the life of the log with oak logs because it has that nice thick protective bark and it's a real dense wood. So, for instance, the same size logs, if it was an oak log with shiitakes on it, the typical log lasts between 5 and 8 years, whereas a similar sized log, if it's maple, will only last 3 or 4 years.
Okay, that's something I was going to ask you. I was wondering how long you could use the same logs for, how long they would keep producing.
A couple of years. Once you inoculate them, they're inoculated. You really don't have to do anything else to them other than harvest mushrooms. You can do things like soaking the logs to force fruit them throughout the year. But we found the easier way, at least for our log production, is to mix up the tree species that we're using. Plus, we grow on our logs. I think right now we have 13 or 14 different varieties of shiitakes growing on all those logs, and some of them are cold weather strains, some are warm weather strains, some are wide range strains. So they all have slightly different temperature ranges that they'll fruit it under. And so that really allows us to not have to worry so much about force fruiting the logs, because it can get tiring carrying logs around and filtering the tank and doing all that.
Sure.
And, that's one of the big reasons we also have moved most of our mushroom production indoors. It's, instead of taking a year to 2 years before we get a crop of shiitakes off of a log on sawdust, it only takes us 7 or 8 weeks. A much quicker turnaround.
Do you just have to water them down occasionally or keep them moist that way, or when you have them inside?
Yeah. For the most part, we really just kind of leave them and let them fruit with Mother Nature. There's been a couple of times when we've had some severe drought where I'll have to water them. But the way it is now, I really don't have an irrigation system set up for the logs. I do have them set in an area that is just on the edge of our woods, which is on the backside of a dam, and it's lower than our pond, and so I'm able to siphon water out of the pond down into the woods to some holding tanks so I can soak the logs if I need to force fruit them. But for the most part, we really just kind of stack them up and let them do their thing.
I was just wondering about the ones you bring inside. You say you grow some of them in a building. I was wondering how you...
Oh, yeah. Those ones, they already have all the moisture in the substrate that they need. But the room is kept at about 90 to 95% humidity, and it has lots of fresh air coming in, and all that air is filtered, and the room is kept really, really clean. And so mostly it's just creating the ideal environment for them to fruit.
I'm kind of curious about that. How do you maintain the humidity in that room?
Well, I found, they do sell some large-scale kind of commercial-type misters and foggers. But I found the cheapest and the best thing, at least for us so far, since our room is kind of small, is actually just a setup using ultrasonic pond foggers, and you can buy those on Amazon or just about all over on the internet.
Okay.
And they're just these little ultrasonic foggers that you buy to put in ponds to create kind of a smoky fog effect.
Okay.
But by doing that, I'm able to run those in a tub of water, and they produce the fog and atomize the water molecules into vapor, and I just have a fan blowing over that to kind of spread that throughout the room.
Okay, that'd be a good place to start your vegetables too, probably, if you get some light on them in there in that room with that kind of humidity.
Yeah, it could be. I've been thinking about putting some orchids in the room, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You run into some issues with plants being in there, with bacteria and other weed fungi,
right.
or insects if the substrate's not real good and clean. But we're in the process of renovating. We had been using it as a barn, but really it was just a detached 2-car garage. And we're renovating that and turning that into our new mushroom house. And I have plans to build a seedling greenhouse, kind of a lean-to type greenhouse on the south side of that barn structure. And I have plans, at least a theory in my head that hopefully it'll pan out, where I can cycle that humid mushroom air through the greenhouse, because the mushrooms create an awful lot of carbon dioxide. And one of the things that's critical for them to grow indoors is to keep those carbon dioxide levels low so that the mushrooms grow properly. And I have this idea in my head of having the exhaust air from the mushroom room going into that greenhouse and kind of using the plants in the greenhouse as a carbon scrub to then soak up that CO2, release oxygen, and then I can bring that air back in to the mushroom room, but it'll maintain hopefully maintain its temperature and humidity a little bit better, instead of just pumping all that humid, temperature controlled air straight outside.
Use the plants to kind of filter the air.
Right.
Yeah. So almost like just a symbiotic kind of rotation between the two, almost like a aquaponics setup, but in the air. That's kind of neat.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's another project we have. We have a pretty good sized hoop house that we have, and last year I built our first aquaponics system out of a 275 gallon IBC tote, and worked pretty well for us. It eventually failed, mostly I think due to just me not keeping a good enough eye on things. But it worked real well for a while. But we're planning on expanding that a little bit this year and keeping up with that. It's another real cool thing. Last year I had just caught a couple of catfish out of our pond and put it in.
Yeah.
But this year we plan on. I think what we're going to end up doing is some yellow perch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little more. Well, the catfish are pretty hardy too, but the perch as well. I know a lot of people do the tilapia, but where I live, it's just not usually as an option you can run with for too long.
Yeah,
anyways.
I'm not too keen on the idea of having to heat the water in there
right.
in the early spring and late into the fall.
Sure. Aquaponics is a pretty hot topic right now. Everybody seems to be getting into it, but and it's for good reason though. I mean, it's kind of changing the landscape on a lot of gardening issues, that we've had in the past.
Yeah, really good.
And I think talking about expanding that a little bit. I mean, from everything I hear, is the larger you go, the easier it actually gets with aquaponics.
That's my understanding too, and I haven't really noticed it because we've only had the one system and only had it running for one season. But I've had fish tanks all my life ever since I was a kid, and if it's anything like fish tanks, the larger the system, the easier it is to kind of maintain homeostasis.
Sure, and if you can, and I know if you can really take advantage of everything with the aquaponics, like the fish waste and everything, and really take advantage of what you get there for your fertilizers and things like that. I mean, they're really worth putting the time and energy into if you really take advantage of them.
Yeah.
I watch some videos every once in a while. Those you've probably seen them, the Urban Farm guys that's in Kansas City, Missouri, I think.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
They got a pretty neat setup with their aquaponics and their filtering systems and how they use the fish waste and stuff, and it's pretty impressive, really.
It is, and what I really like about it is it seems like you can go as low tech as just one tiny little pump and letting gravity do most of the work for you, all the way up to really making it high tech with all sorts of swirl filters and doing NFT type hydroponic channels, and really kind of getting into it. And I really like that aspect of it. That's one of the things I really like about the mushrooms too, is you can do it really, really basic and low tech, or you can go all the way to having a completely environmentally controlled room to grow things in. And I really like having things set up so that we can do both of that, because we get a lot of bad storms around here, and there'll be times when we won't have power for a week, and it's nice to still have things growing even if we don't have our electricity. But when everything's working well, it's nice to be able to really pump things out when we have the convenience of the grid, so to speak.
Yeah, when it's your money crop, you want to have both options available to you for sure.
Right.
Now, when you sell your mushrooms, do you just sell them at the farmers market, or do you have some connections through some retail establishments or anything like that?
We've the last couple of years we've mostly been doing farmers markets. We have a small CSA. A couple of years ago we did a full CSA where we were doing vegetables and eggs, mushrooms, and everything. Right now we've kind of scaled that back.
A lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah, vegetables are mostly just for us and trading. But we still have I call it our shroom shares. It's just a mushroom CSA where folks, same setup as a typical CSA, except the members are just getting a variety of mushrooms each week. But then majority is through a big market that we have locally. That's actually a really great market. This year coming up is going to be the 40th year of this farmers market here in Carbondale. And I believe it's one of the longest running markets in Illinois.
Oh, wow.
But mostly that we sell a little bit. There's a neighborhood cooperative grocery store, and we sell to them. And we sell to a couple of small restaurants in town. As we expand things, we'll probably be adding a couple more farmers markets and really increasing our wholesale type orders to supply more restaurants and more grocery stores and things.
Well, the CSA is pretty interesting. I think you're the first guy I've ever heard of doing a mushroom CSA. I've not heard of that before. That's pretty neat.
It is. It's kind of specialized, and there's to be totally honest, there's not a huge market for it. It's kind of some of our real loyal customers that are a part of it, some of whom are either vegetarian or vegan, and so they make mushrooms part of their diet because it's, they're loaded with protein and all sorts of vitamins, and they're a great meat substitute.
Sure.
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of people wonder about CSAs and getting into them, and that's what I found out. Some people think that unless you have an acre of organic vegetables, you shouldn't do a CSA. But there's a lot of people, even in urban settings, with small shares and just dealing with just a few people that run CSAs. And it's a pretty neat way to go about selling your vegetables, and you don't have to be huge to do it. Right.
That's kind of what got us started with it. It was mostly the 2 years we did the CSA, we were real small. I think the first year we had just under 10. I think the second year we had 13 or 14 members. So real small CSA. And honestly, it really wasn't a big profit kind of thing, but it definitely paid us for our time in the garden and really helped with those big seed orders that come up in January when not a whole lot of cash flow going on.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, I've always try to encourage people any way I can that are doing homesteading, because, it's the more time you can put into it, the better. And to do that, sometimes you need to pay yourself something. I mean, you need to find a way to make some kind of an income where maybe you don't have to work a 80-hour-a-week job somewhere to pay for your homestead, So I'm always trying to find new ways, not just for others, but even for myself. There's always ways you can make a few extra bucks here and there on the homestead,
Yeah, that's what I really liked about doing the CSA was it we were going to be spending all that, the pretty much the same amount of hours in our garden no matter what, and having 5 or 10 members help pay for things really helped, kind of bridge that gap, and it helped cover the cost of not only the materials but our time in the garden. And so it wasn't, not that growing vegetables is ever really a loss, because what you're eating, a huge high dollar value to it, especially if you're doing things organically. If you would put that into terms of what you'd be spending buying that at farmers markets or at the store, it's a huge money savings.
Oh yeah, even if you never sold any, it's worth doing. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, but it really helped kind of pay for that time that we were spending doing that.
Absolutely. Now, are you ever thinking about ever getting into like shipping some of your medicinal mushrooms or anything like that, or are you just always going to sell those locally?
No, we have thought about that. That was kind of, when we first started doing the mushrooms, we were mostly just focusing on the edibles, and the medicinal ones have kind of just come up organically. Mostly we had grown them for ourselves, and as we make extracts and take them ourselves, and started sharing them with some friends and some neighbors, and they started getting hooked on them and really liking them. And we're really talking about how it was, especially like the reishi mushroom, how it was really helping some of our neighbors with their arthritis issues and things like that. And
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What are kind of some of the medicinal benefits of those? Just arthritis.
They really run the gamut. For instance, the reishi mushroom is just incredible. It's an anti-inflammatory, so it's great for inflammation and arthritis type issues. It's a bit of an energy booster. It's a lot of these medicinal mushrooms are being shown in study after study to have anti-cancer effects and anti-tumor effects. They help moderate blood pressure and cholesterol levels. They're finding that they help keep blood glucose levels in check. They help modulate the immune system. They have a real interesting way of kind of bringing everything into homeostasis, where if you have an underactive immune system, they help bolster it and help bring your immune system up to a healthy functioning level. But they're also good for people with conditions where their immune system is overactive, and can help bring it back down to a more normal functioning level. And so they've been a huge help to us, and people are really liking them. And so we actually just put in an order for a whole bunch of bottles, and we're getting some labels made up, and we're going to start taking those to market. I might eventually start offering them for sale on our website and things.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think a lot of people take advantage of that. I've read a lot about the like detoxing and stuff like that with mushrooms, how they're even in the environment. They have like they can be used to clean water, clean the earth. I mean, I've even heard about like around Chernobyl and stuff, how it's cleaning the radiation out of the ground and the air there.
Right.
So.
They do. There's just incredible things that they do. In particular, the oyster mushrooms, which is one of the main mushrooms we grow because it's so aggressive. We just grow it on pasteurized straw, wheat straw, but it grows on cottonseed hulls and grow on hair, corn stalks, phone books, newspaper, just about anything. But it does, and these mushrooms excrete these enzymes that are designed to break down lignin and cellulose, and which are really, really stable molecules. And they also have the ability to break down polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which means these enzymes can break down dioxins, DDT, PCBs, petroleum products, They were doing experiments with them to help bioremediate and break down oil from the Gulf oil spill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then, like you said, around Chernobyl, there's been a lot of talk. If anybody's interested, there's a mycologist named Paul Stamets, and he's got several books out and he's got several TED Talks out there and a lot of information online. But they're, I don't remember if they're actually doing it, if this was just something that he was proposing, but they tend to bioaccumulate heavy metals and radiation.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's talking about things like in Chernobyl or after Fukushima, going out, basically inoculating the landscape with these fungus, and they would then bioaccumulate the radiation and concentrate it into the fruiting bodies. And so they're pulling it all out of the contaminated soil, accumulating it, and concentrating it in the fruiting bodies, in the mushrooms, and then you can have your guys in hazmat suits come through and harvest the mushrooms, and I don't know what they do with them at that point, incinerate them or blast them off to the moon or whatever, but you're at least concentrating it and using that as a way to draw it out of the soil.
Sure.
But just all sorts of things. I mean, some of these mushrooms, the oyster mushroom and the wine cap mushroom, are both shown to feed on bacteria like fecal coliform and E. coli, so they're good at filtering water for, like in the instance of runoff coming off of agriculture fields from pastures, heavily used pastures. The oyster mushrooms excrete an enzyme that stuns and basically paralyzes soil nematodes, and then the fungus will go in and eat and actually consume soil nematodes. The wine cap mushroom grows these little microscopic snares that will capture nematodes, and then they'll digest them. It's just the more you start learning about mushrooms and fungi, the more amazing things you constantly are learning.
Truly is amazing. Now, I guess with all that, though, the way they absorb, that you'd really have to be careful in what kind of an environment you were growing them in and eating them, because it would take on some of the properties of where you were growing them, for sure, wouldn't it?
Yeah, to a certain degree. Like I had mentioned, one of the few things they do is they will bioaccumulate heavy metals and radiation. You do have to be careful about that. What's nice about them is the way that they digest their food is it's entirely extracellular. So they're excreting these enzymes, breaking the substrate, the food source, down into available nutrients, and then reabsorbing that.
Okay.
And so they do have a way
of fix it before they take it back. Yeah.
Exactly, and that also makes them really beneficial. For instance, to grow them in mulch layers with vegetables, because they're breaking down these mulch layers, excreting these enzymes, breaking things down, and what's left over is plant available nutrients. And so there's all sorts of studies coming out where they're trialing doing asparagus and corn and all sorts of different vegetables with inoculated mulch layers, and they're realizing anything from, I've read varying numbers, but anywhere from 40 to 60% increases in yields with things like asparagus and tomatoes and corn.
That's impressive.
Yeah, plus you get tasty little bonus mushrooms coming up out of your mulch layer.
Amazing how when all this is working together, and I guess that's what I like about permaculture, just working all these things together, and how you just really maximize, your just how everything is working. When you plant the right things together and grow the right stuff around each other, everything just goes to the extreme.
Right. Yeah. Really maximize things, close all those loops, and get everything working for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing how nature is better at doing the things that we think we do. Right. That's great. Well, it sounds like you got an awful lot going on there. I mean, it does sound like you're the right guy to talk to when it comes to dealing with mushrooms, for sure. You've been doing this for a little while, and it sounds like it's kind of took you in a little bit, and
it definitely has. Yeah.
Well, what would you say to someone who's thinking about growing mushrooms, but maybe they're just a little intimidated because maybe they've never done it, or they just think maybe it's a little too complicated? Would you recommend they jump into something like that?
Yeah, really that's the great thing about mushrooms is it's a really easy thing to just start. If you're trying to get into it commercial scale, just like anything, you run into all sorts of other issues of trying to do things to their maximum potential. But it's real easy. There's a lot of companies, and most small farms, when they're at farmers markets, if you ask them if they're not already doing it, a lot of them can make small ready-to-fruit kits, especially with oyster mushrooms. There's lots of companies out there like Fungi Protecti and Field and Forest, and several others that you can purchase spawn for, and have great little kits for growing mushrooms. I mean, you can grow these oyster mushrooms on straw. You can grow them. Some of these companies sell little kits that you can pour boiling water onto a roll of toilet paper and inoculate the toilet paper and have mushrooms growing off of that.
I've seen people growing them in clothes baskets in their house, like in a basement or
something. Yeah, exactly. And so they're a really easy thing to get into. Making it a little bit trickier, when you're trying to do things on a commercial scale, but you don't, not everything has to be done on a commercial scale. It's real easy to get going.
Yeah, you have to start small for sure.
Yeah, inoculating logs is an easy thing to do. It's the sort of thing where you can read and read and read about it, and you'll think you have a really good understanding, but really the best thing to do is to just jump into it.
Yeah, I've found that with most things. You can do a little bit of research, and that's always good. Watch a few videos, read a few books, but ultimately you just have to do it. That's right.
Yeah, it is. The fastest way to learn is to make those mistakes.
That's right. Maybe you got somebody around you that can kind of guide you along that's done it before and's already made those mistakes, but if you don't, you just have to jump in there and do it. Absolutely. So, well, I'm going to put a couple links on the show notes for your Facebook page and your website. Is there any other way people could get a hold of you if they want to? Or
I think my phone number and email and all that should be on both of those sites.
Okay. And this is the part where modern technology let us down, and we lost our phone connection. But I called Mike back a few minutes later just to end our conversation, and he said his contact information can be found on his website. I'll have links to Mike's pages in the show notes. I also put the link to the TED Talk with Paul Stamets that Mike referred to in the show notes. Those notes can be found at smalltownhomestead.com.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.